Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Monday, October 19th, 2020, and today we're going to be taking a look at a 2020 Senate map based off the 538 polling averages for these individual states. So, we're going to go ahead and take a look at all of the safe states, move down to the likely ones, then lean, then tilt. You know how this goes. We're going to start off. Now, if you're wondering where I'm getting these numbers from, I said 538, but more specifically from the latest polls page, and if you just go over to poll type, generally, I look at presidential general election, but this time around, I'm going to be taking a look at United States Senate, and then I go into each individual state. Now, for the sake of keeping the polls at least moderately accurate, I went with B-rated pollsters. For whatever reason, 538 includes B/C, so if you're wondering why, the Arkansas poll is included, that is why. But for certain states where we didn't see any polls that were, in safe states such as Wyoming or really Massachusetts, I chose polls that were rated lower than that just for the sake of getting one in, but some states really have just been utterly ignored this entire election cycle, for example, Nebraska. But let's get into this. Let's focus on the safe states first. Now, we're going to start off with the safe Republican states and then move on to the safe Democratic states, generally how it goes. So let's start. The first state that is considered safe for the GOP, based off polling data, is the state of Idaho. Now, the next state, in alphabetical order, is Kentucky. Now, I know a lot of Democrats have been sending money to Amy McGrath. A number of, groups have campaigned on her behalf, sent out ads. But all in all, Mitch McConnell is going to win the Senate race, and he's up 16 points on the average of the three most recent polls. That's also the mark that I used. I forgot to mention that, the three most recent ones. So Kentucky goes red. The next state is Louisiana. This looks like it might make it past a jungle primary. It probably won't. But we all know that it'll end up with two Republicans. And even if it ends up with a Democrat, realistically, it is not going to the Democratic Party. Nebraska is the next state to go on the list for the Republican Party. There are no polls. I just went with the initial characterization that I put, and that's not going to change. Oklahoma goes for the GOP, Tennessee, West Virginia, and Wyoming. So these are all of the safe, and South Dakota. I forgot to mention that one. And these are all of the safe Democratic and safe Republican seats. Now we can move on to the safe Democratic seats. Now, there are some notable absences from the safe Republican list. If you're looking at a normal map, you'd probably think that Kansas and Arkansas and Mississippi should be up there, but they're not. Let's get into the Democratic seats, and then we'll talk about those specifically. So the first state is not Connecticut. Sorry, the first state is Delaware. I don't know why I thought it was Connecticut. Delaware goes to the Democratic Party. The next state is Illinois. Then, surprisingly enough, New Hampshire, actually not surprising whatsoever, but generally, in an election year, New Hampshire would be competitive. This is not the case. New Jersey, Oregon, Rhode Island, and I believe that is it for the safe states. Now, we do have some notable absences here as well. We don't see Virginia or Massachusetts characterized as safe, but there are reasons for that. We will get into it. So now we can move on to the likely Republican states. They have less likely states than lean states, but let's get into them. I mean, these aren't too surprising. We have Alabama, which has Tommy Tuberville up 8 points on the past three polls average. In Texas, we have John Cornyn up 7%. So both of those states likely for the GOP. And like I previously mentioned, the state of Arkansas, well, in Arkansas, it looks like, for whatever reason, Tom Cotton is running ahead of the Libertarian candidate by a mere 11%. Now, I don't trust that. I don't think that's right. But if you want to look at it yourself, here we go. American Research Group shows Harrington and Cotton 11-point difference. Honestly, I think this is a complete outlier. I don't think this is the result. Maybe if Democrats ended up voting for the Libertarian Party out of spite, well, we know who's going to win, and it is going to be a Republican stronghold. It's just that poll does throw the entire thing for a loop. So Arkansas is likely for the GOP. Normally, it would be considered safe. Now, for the likely Democratic seats, we have a lot more. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And, this will fill up states such as Massachusetts and the state of Virginia. So let's get into it. Starting alphabetically, Arizona is a likely Democratic state. Mark Kelley is up 7 points here. That is very significant. This seat was literally won by Republicans 4 years ago. It's held by a Republican who just lost in 2018. So Arizona, likely for the Democrats. Neighboring Colorado, where you can stand in all four states at once at the four-corner spot around here, Colorado goes to the Democrats. It's a likely margin. The next state is Georgia Senate special election. Surprisingly, I think this is an outlier, absolutely. Quinnipiac University typically does this, but Quinnipiac University has Raphael Warnock on average up 10 points in Georgia Senate special election, whether against Kelly Loeffler or Doug Collins. Now, I think that is absolutely an outlier. It's still Georgia. We will never see a Democrat win by double digits in this election, but it looks like the polling numbers do indicate that. And I'm not one to say that is going to be accurate, but I'm basing it purely off the numbers. Again, I don't argue with numbers. The next state is Massachusetts, which has Ed Markey up 10 points. Huge outlier. That's definitely not going to be the margin, but we're going to characterize it with the numbers that we were given. In Minnesota, Tina Smith is up 8 points on the average of the last 3 polls, which I think is pretty interesting. She'll probably win by a larger margin than that. Ben Ray Lujan is also, he's up by 11 points statewide, and then in Virginia, Mark Warner is up 11 points. So that's all of the likely Democratic states. That puts the Democrats at 48. The Republicans are at 42. Now we can move on to the lean states. There are more lean Republican states than lean Democratic states, but the Democrats should be pretty happy with where they are today. So alphabetically, the state of Alaska is the state that is considered to be lean for the GOP. That's not too surprising. Alaska is a 4.3% margin. Dan Sullivan has been in a competitive race for the past couple of months, so that probably won't shift too much before Election Day. The Republicans will still likely hold it, but it probably won't be a deafening margin for the GOP. In Kansas, Roger Marshall is up on average 2.3%. I think that is also important to note just because it is Kansas, and you never would have thought Kansas would be competitive a year ago, 6 months ago. So I think that's fascinating. The next state is Mississippi. This is a state where the GOP is currently up by 5 points. Cindy Hyde-Smith actually only won her last election in Mississippi by 8%. So technically, she could have been in a competitive race. Most pundits rated as safe. I rated as likely. We will see on Election Day, which is, I believe, 15 days away from today. So Mississippi, Kansas, Alaska are already lean Republican states. The next state is Montana. This is a lean Republican state. Steve Daines is up on average 4% statewide, so that's pretty strong. I mean, the Democrats have always thought that this was in reach. It is in reach, but they are not the favorites to win it. In South Carolina, this is a state where Lindsey Graham is running ahead by ahead of his Democratic opponent by a mere 4%. I mean, this race has taken a sudden turn. It went from safe to likely to lean, which is now a toss-up. According to the Koch Political Report, it took 4 stages, and it is just so difficult for Lindsey Graham at this point. I mean, he's going to win, probably. It's very little time for the Democrats to change the trajectory of this race. But if this race had gone on a month longer, the Democrats could actually be leading at some point, because the momentum that they had 6 months ago, and they continued it through this election. I mean, South Carolina went from being probably one of the safest states in the country to being one of the closest. And now Lindsey Graham is up 4 points statewide. He will probably win. He is the favorite to win, but you cannot count out his Democratic opponent just yet. He has a roughly 1 in 5% chance of victory, and that's honestly not bad at all for a Democrat in a very traditionally Republican state. So that's it for the lean Republican states, and that puts them at 47. For the lean Democratic states, spoiler alert, there are no tilt Democratic states. Let's get into them. So the first state is actually Iowa. It shows Teresa Greenfield up 2% over Joni Ernst in this battleground state. That actually could be very realistic. Right now, that's the average, and that probably won't end up coming true on Election Day unless Joni Ernst does have a last-minute surge. In Maine, Sarah Gideon is the favorite. She has a 5-point lead over Susan Collins in this race. Again, very competitive, but right now the Democrats are the favorites to win. In Michigan, Gary Peters is only up 4 points despite Joe Biden being up 7-8% in the state. He will likely run behind Biden, but still probably win. And then the final state is North Carolina. This is a state where Cal Cunningham, despite having a recent texting scandal, is still up in this state, according to the last 3 polls. And on average, he has maintained his lead throughout the entirety of the campaign season. North Carolina goes blue. Now, the final state to be characterized is Georgia, which is the closest race on this map. It is a tilt characterization for David Perdue. He's up 0.3% on the average in Georgia. And all in all, I mean, Georgia, had I told you David Perdue would be in one of the most competitive Senate races in the country, you probably would not have believed me. But as you look at this map, look at how few safe states for both sides. I mean, for the Democrats, they have 2 more safe states, counting for the amount that they had entering into the election. But in terms of the toss-up races, out of all of the lean states, I believe all of the lean states are currently held by the GOP, except for Michigan. And for the likely states, Colorado, Arizona are currently held by the Republican Party, and Georgia Senate special election. So the GOP at this point, the polls don't necessarily point out that they're going to absolutely take the majority or retain the majority. It actually puts the Democrats ahead 52-48. Obviously, things can change. It's just this is a snapshot 15 days before the election. Things don't dramatically shift. 2016 was probably, according to 538, actually was one of the most dramatic shifts in a presidential election since 1972 in the final 2 weeks. I think it was actually the most dramatic shift except for one election. So all in all, I mean, things probably won't change too heavily. And right now the Democrats are favored based off polls. And obviously it's up to you whether or not to trust them. Never really trust them. They're not going to be 100% accurate, but they give us a general idea. And that general idea right now is that the Democrats will win the Senate majority. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord link for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch and then a playlist for my 2020 Senate election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.